Welcome to Skill Sprint with me, Chris Webber. This video is a quick highlight reel of my latest episode of the Commercial Edge podcast. I use my notes and scribbles from the full-length conversation to pull out what I feel are the headlines and lessons from my most recent expert guest. Drawing on my experience, this video gives you all the key points without the stories. My hope is that you can use these tips and tricks to unleash the power of your people. Just finished a recording of the latest podcast with Jeff Benveniste. And Jeff runs a company called Global Edge, and they specialize in conversations. And it was absolutely perfect as a foundation for talking about difficult conversations. His experience of teaching and coaching clients on how to improve their conversations, how to communicate better, was a wonderful place to start as we explore difficult conversations. And what was interesting about the episode was we went through three main areas. The first area was, what is a difficult conversation? The second bit was about why are they difficult? And the third bit then is, so how do I do it better? And the interesting point about what are difficult conversations, I think there are two parts to that. There is our own perception. It's going to be difficult for me to have this conversation because I'm worried about it. Or there's another part of it, which is this is going to be a difficult conversation because I know it's going to be difficult for the other person to hear. And I think that makes a difference as to how you approach that conversation. And Jeff and I had talked about it, and he agrees that if it's going to be difficult for you, then you can think about it, you can practice, you can prepare for it. If it's going to be difficult for them, then that requires more empathy, more understanding as to why that it's going to be difficult for them. So thinking about that as a start point, I think was a great piece of advice just to take away from this episode. The second part about why are they difficult? Well, that's three areas that Jeff described at the start of the episode, and I really liked this. And the three areas are, I think there's going to be disagreement here. We have different points of view. The second was, it's going to be emotional. Emotions are going to be involved in this discussion. And then the third area is there are consequences, i.e. this is an important element. This is something that we need to get right. And if those three ingredients are there, it's likely that you're going to have a difficult conversation. Now, I love that diagnosis because that's a great place to start from about, is this going to be a difficult conversation or not? And if they're not all there, perhaps we're worrying about nothing. Perhaps your fears are unfounded and you don't need to think about approaching this as a difficult conversation. Have confidence in them. But if they are there, what do you do about it? And I think the key message from Jeff, or there's three messages he left the audience with, which I'll come to in a second. But for me, one of the things that he said was about being direct but respectful. Direct but respectful. So you need to say it, but you need to say it in a way that's respectful. So I tested him. I said, what do you mean by respectful? What is that? And he explained it in a way that said it's about understanding that they're going to be emotional and being empathetic to that, and about giving them space to respond, giving them space to react. And that creates that feeling of respect, and it's much more likely to end up in a positive conversation, in a proactive conversation. So what about the three things that he talked about? What about those? Well, he said that you need to understand, why is this a difficult conversation for you? What are the elements about it? Have you got an open mind? Are you self-aware so that you approach this knowing that my usual style might not be the right way to approach this, and then think about how I need to flex your style, which builds on to then having a framework, having different styles, different approaches that you need to be able to solve this problem, and in terms of how do I change how I communicate here. And his third area was practice, something I talk about all the time, but underlined by what Jeff talked about. Prepare through practice. It could be find a colleague that you trust to have this conversation with. Video yourself, watch it back. Do it in the mirror. It doesn't really matter, but find a way to try it. And the word of the day for me was experimentation. Experiment. If you always do things one way, then you're not learning, you're not growing, you're not trying different things. Through experimentation, through creating a space where you can practice and experiment, you will learn what works and what works in different situations. And I encourage you, experiment. Well, what could you do differently as a result of what you've just heard? Find me on LinkedIn and let me know. For more like this, and to join in the conversation, search the Commercial Edge podcast wherever you listen to your content. Want to unleash the power of your people? Subscribe to the newsletter, link below. See you soon.